the implication under fixed exchange rate regime. Okay. So let's think about this again. Under fixed exchange rate, this is a must. This must occur. Okay? And actually there is another condition. Here we implicitly assume that capital is what? Perfectly mobile. Right? There's no barrier, right, of capital. So capital can flow in and flow out of our country freely. Right here, we do not assume any barrier to capital. Okay? So here we have three things. First, capital is perfectly mobile. Second, fixed exchange rate regime. And third, here, what does this mean? If we adopt fixed exchange rate regime, that implies what? Our interest rate should be equal to foreign interest rate. We have no choice. Right? Which means what? We cannot implement any kind of monetary policy. Right? Monetary policy, remember? Right? Basically, the central bank can increase or decrease its money supply to change the interest rate, right? To affect the economy, right? But here, if we adopt fixed exchange rate, that means we give up the choice to use monetary policy. Right? Okay, so that is the implication here. So in words, under a fixed exchange rate and the perfect capital mobility, the domestic interest rate must be equal to foreign interest rate. You have no choice at all. Okay, so increases in the domestic demand for money must be matched by increases in the money supply in order to maintain the interest rate constant, so that the following condition holds. Namely, in the equilibrium condition in the financial market, namely this equation, little I should be replaced by I star for always. You cannot affect the money supply to achieve different interest rate level. The only choice you can have is to what? Accept the foreign interest rate I star here. Okay? Okay, so under fixed exchange rate, the central bank gives up monetary policy as a policy instrument. And this is actually called impossible trinity. So someone heard about this before?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, namely, if we have fixed exchange rate, so there's a triangle here, okay? So here, if we have a fixed exchange rate, and here we have monetary policy, and there we have perfect capital mobility. So impossible trinity tells us that we can at most have two of the three. Okay, like there. That means what? If we want fixed exchange rate, if we want perfect capital mobility, then we cannot have our freedom to use monetary policy. So that one should be given up. Okay? And for China, I think maybe, I'm not sure right now, okay? Maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, okay? Then China had this. But it must imply that it should give up this. Namely, China put a lot of constraint or restriction on the mobility of capital. Maybe nowadays, I think, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it can affect the exchange rate and also the monetary policy to try to affect the economy. Okay? You heard about that before?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about the fixed fiscal policy under fixed exchange rate regime. Okay, so still let's use our ISLM framework. Okay, here let's assume that the government increases its spending, so that IS curve shifts to the right. So I and Y both rise up. Okay. Okay, now we know that here. I'm not sure if there is a picture there. No. So here, if we have a IPC picture here, right? When I rises, that means capital E will rise, right? But here we say that this country adopts fixed exchange rate regime. So that is not allowed, okay? And when we talk about fixed exchange rate regime, that means I should be equal to I star for always. And here, at point A, the interest rate level should be the foreign interest rate level. Okay? So if G rises, I shift to the right, I will rise, and that is not allowed. Because this will break our fixed exchange rate regime. Okay? So if we are the policymaker, what should we do? We should try to keep the interest rate fixed so that exchange rate can be fixed. Okay? So here, the central bank should increase its money supply to this position so that the interest rate keeps unchanged. Okay, so this shift is actually the monetary accommodation. Okay, so under fixed exchange rate regime, the fiscal policy is actually more effective, right? Because if we are adopting floating exchange rate regime, then Y will only increase to this level, right? But because we adopt fixed exchange rate regime, the central bank needs to accommodate that fiscal policy to keep the interest rate unchanged so that capital E is fixed. Okay, so under fixed exchange rate regime, fiscal policy is more effective. Namely, Y increases by more. Okay? Central bank must accommodate the resulting increase in the demand for money. Yeah. Okay, any questions? No? Then, the last page, I think. Okay, there are a number of reasons why countries choosing to fix its interest rate appears to be a bad idea. By fixing the exchange rate, a country gives up a powerful tool for correcting trade imbalances, or changing the level of economic activity. So namely, under fixed exchange rate, the government or the policymakers, okay, they only have one tool, namely the fiscal policy, right? So it's more difficult, right, to uh, to save the world, right? With only one tool, right? Two tools are better, of course, right? Okay, by committing to a particular exchange rate, a country also gives up control of its interest rate, yeah, because I must be equal to I star. And they must match movement in the foreign interest rate, risking unwanted effects on its own activity. And lastly, although the country retains control of fiscal policy, one policy instrument is not enough. A country that wants to decrease its budget deficit cannot, under fixed exchange rates, use monetary policy to offset the contractionary effect of fiscal policy on output. So basically, you can draw a picture to try to analyze this kind of situation. You'll find that it's impossible to achieve two goals at the same time with only one policy. Okay, earlier I used to talk about the policy mix, right? Right. So we cannot achieve multiple goals with only one tool. Okay, that is that. Okay, questions? Okay, from now on, I will use the board instead of the slides. Okay, so let me just raise the screen. So what's that?
We're recording you.
Oh, really? Hi. For what?
For my one before final test.
Oh, okay. Preparation?
Yeah, preparation.
Okay. I hope that works. Okay, today I want to talk about one model. What's this?
Ya lo hice de la semana pasada.
Can I tear this down?
No te has dado cuenta que cuando revisas material en internet, cada
Whatsoever,
tiene su
right?
método. Yo me di
Yes.
cuenta que como una
Okay. Let me first define something, okay? You probably need to take pictures or write those things down, okay? Take notes. Okay, BOP, balance of payments. Okay, definition of BOP. It's supply and demand for a country. Or record of a country. International transaction. And it includes two things, like we see in the slide, right? Current account and capital account. Okay? And the main part of current account is net export. Okay? And of course, we have, say, net investment and net transfers payment, right, in the table. But here, that's because the biggest part is net export. So let me just consider net export here. Okay. And so that is export minus import. For capital account, we have basically capital inflow and capital outflow. Okay? And let me give them a name, KI and KO. Not that KO, okay? Okay. Here, the current account is export minus import. And actually, I can assume a specific form. Okay, export minus import. So the first term in the bracket is export, and the second term in the bracket is the import. Okay, and export is a function of foreign output and the real exchange rate. So here, you might ask me, okay, in our slide, we have export minus import divided by epsilon, right? But here, I get rid of that, because if we use this term, then we need to assume the Marshall-Lerner condition. Okay, so for simplicity, I just get rid of that epsilon. Okay, and assume that net export is export minus import. Sure. Okay, so we can actually rearrange the whole thing. Okay, to have this form. So current account is actually this equation. And then, if we look at this equation, we can divide the whole thing into two parts. The first part and the second part. Okay? And based on this equation, we can draw the current account line like this. It is a downward sloping because the coefficient for y here is minus IN1, right? So this is a minus number. So that's why it's a downward sloping line, right? And there, if y equals 0, this will be the intercept here, okay? Okay, so here, from this equation and from this picture, we know that the slope here is minus IM1. So here we know that if y rises, if the domestic output rises, current account will fall, right? If y rises, current account will fall, right? And this is actually the movement along the current account line, right? Namely, if y rises, CA will fall, okay? And if epsilon rises, if our stuff is more expensive, okay, current account line will shift down, okay, and this is a shift of the current account line. This is line. This is line. Okay, so if epsilon rises, the whole line will shift down. Okay, it will shift down. Right, epsilon. But epsilon rises because here the coefficient is negative, so the level of CA will fall for every level of y. So the whole line will shift down. Okay? Okay, and from the information we are given here, we can also see that CA line will shift down if, say, this coefficient falls or this coefficient rises, right? Or and so on and so forth. It should be easy, right, to find out, right? So let me just keep that, right? Okay, so this is the current account. What I'm talking here is what? I'm talking about the external equilibrium for an economy. Okay? What does that mean? That means BP should be equals to 0. Namely, current account should be equal to capital account, if you remember last year. Thank you. Right? In the table, do you remember we have upper part and we have lower part, right? And current account, the balance of current account should be equal to the balance of capital account. So the two sum to 0. And that is called external equilibrium for a country. Okay? So if BP is not 0, then something should happen to make it 0. Okay? And I'll talk about that later. Okay? Yeah, of course, the opposite idea or the opposite concept is internal equilibrium. Okay, what is internal equilibrium? That is the cross of the ISLM in our picture. Okay, that is called internal equilibrium. Okay, let me move on. Capital account is assumed to be Ki minus Ko. Capital inflow minus capital outflow. And of course, we can give it a linear form. Okay? And let me just assume two linear forms for Ki and Ko. Let's say Ki is Ki now plus Ki1 times R minus Rw. And Ko is equal to Ko now plus Ko1 times, oh sorry, it should be minus. Times R minus Rw. Let me explain, okay? Ki is a function of R minus Rw. R is the domestic real interest rate. Okay? Rw is the world interest rate level. Okay? So here, from the two equations, we can see that if the domestic interest rate is higher than the world interest rate, then capital will flow in, right, our country, because our interest rate is higher than the rest of the world. Okay? So if R is greater than Rw, Ki will rise. Okay? Why? Because our bounds more attractive, are more attractive. Okay? And when our interest rate is lower than the rest of the world, capital will flow out, right? And of course, that is because foreign bonds are more attractive. Okay? So capital flows in and out according to the difference, okay, between the domestic interest rate and the world interest rate. Okay? Capital will flow to the place where interest rate is higher. Okay? Okay, then we can just plug these two equations into capital account. And we will get Ki now minus Ko now plus Ki1 plus Ko1 times R minus Rw. And according to that equation, we can draw a picture for Ka. With this picture is R versus Ka. Okay? And if we observe this equation, we can see that this line is positive, right? Sloping. Like this. So this is Ka. And the slope of this is that, right? Ki1 plus Ko1 And of course, you should be able to find out what if, say, Ki now rises. If Ki now rises, the whole line will shift up, right? And if this guy goes up, the whole line shifts down. If these two guys rise, the slope of Ka should be steeper, right? So that should be quite straightforward. And of course, if Rw rises, the whole line will shift down. Okay? Okay. This is Ka. What is BP? BP is just Ca plus Ka. Okay? And let me just erase this part, okay? BP is Ca plus Ka. And in equilibrium, BP equals 0. That means Ca should be negative Ka. Agree? Recall that table, right? So the number of the two, the balances of the two parts of that table of BOP should be the same, and they are what? In opposite, right? Sign. Okay? So for the US, this number is negative, right? And here, the capital account balance is positive, right? For China, it's the opposite. Agree? Yeah. Right?
Okay.
You remember, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we should try to derive the BP line, okay, with the CA and KA lines, okay? So right now, I'm going to derive the BP line. So let me just draw the two graphs for CA and KA. So here, this is the CA line. Here we have Y. Here I have CA. Here I have KA. There I have R, right? So be careful, okay? There we have R. Here we have Y. That's different. Here I have KA. Okay? Okay, now I'm going to derive the BP line on this figure, Y versus R. Okay? And this is actually the figure where I draw the IS and LM curves, right? In the IS and LM curves, we have Y and R in the two axes, right? Okay, good. Okay, now first, let me find two points on the two figures. First, because when BP equals 0, CA equals minus KA, right? So one combination of CA and KA must be 0, 0. Agree? When these two guys are 0, BP equals 0. And that is what? Equilibrium. That is external equilibrium. Okay? That is one combination, one pair, right, of CA and KA. So that's here, right? When Y now equals this level, CA is 0, right? Here in this picture, when R equals R now, KA equals 0. So here we have our first pair of Y and R. Okay, so let me just do that to find our first point in this graph. R is this level, R is this level. The first pair for BP, 0 BP is that one. And let me call this point A, this is point A, and that is point A. This is the first point we find for BP equilibrium. Agree? Secondly, we need to find the second point. Okay? For example, we can see that if Y equals Y1, say here, CA is this big, right? This is CA, say 1, right? Which is this big. This is CA1, and it's negative. Okay? And in order to find a 0 BP, we need to find a positive cathode account with the same magnitude, right? So basically, you can just do this. For example, this magnitude, right? Okay, this magnitude, right? So here, this is KA1, and the corresponding interest rate is R1. Okay, here, the way I do it is, first I find a negative current account here, okay, corresponding to Y1. It's this big, right? So in order for BP to be 0, I need to find a positive Ka, namely a positive Ka with the same distance, And the corresponding interest rate is R1. Okay, so my second point is found, right? So here, let me just put that here. This is Y1. Sorry, this is Y now, okay? R now. And R1 is this distance, right? It should be rigorous. This is R1. Okay, this is my second point. Let me call that point B, and this is point B, and this is point B. Okay. So right now I'm sure that at both point A and B, BP is both zeros. Agree? And let me pause here and take a break. Okay.
Sorry, when you measure, which way did you go?
Oh, okay.
I can see because I saw your mark.
This is Y, right?
Yeah.
You mean from here to here?
Yeah, point B.
Okay. Y, right? Y. R. This.
Sí, también grabé el anterior. Creo, no lo he checado. Pues según yo sí salió bien. ¿Eh? No, pues les voy a esperar hasta que Me estoy preparando para el examen. Sí, hasta que
What's that? My rating is this.